And to think, if only Antoine Dupont could tell a time, it all could have fallen very differently. England knew all they had to do was pile on the points to take the title on Saturday, and they were just about able to do that in Rome against an Italian side who came together to play like a massive human muddy pitch. So, how did Italy shut them down so efficiently for most of a half? And then what did England do to see it home and steal a third title for Eddie Jones from out under French noses? Now, as anyone who listened to Harry Hill's tragic brother warble on at half-time will know, there's this kind of common perception that England, kicking as often as they did, they kicked almost once for every 2 carries they made, is boring and thoughtless and just negative rugby. Austin Healey suggests the tactic is just waiting for Minozzi or another Italian to make a mistake. However, this is kind of typical of how two-dimensional so much thinking about modern rugby can be or is. In last year's championship, England scored 24 tries. 5 of them came directly from kicks. That's a best case scenario for how England played on Saturday. 12 of them, however, that's spot on half for anyone that's good at maths, came from turnover or kick return / counter-attack. That's how England like to break teams down. They attack when you're yet to organise rather than trying to disorganise you themselves. And with most sides being quite secure at the breakdown, the quickest way to create that kind of situation is to force your opposition to kick it back to you. In this championship, Italy have kicked almost every single time they found themselves within 40 metres of their own try line, so Eddie Jones and Owen Farrell knew this was an incredibly sound way to break Italy out of shape. Back in 2003, when teams weren't thinking several phases in advance, a kick like this would just be about trying to force a mistake or find field position, and indeed, Henry Slade's try came from England exploiting some poor positioning in the Italian backfield. However, whilst those are very much things England are hoping for, this kick is more about what happens next. It's a good kick, it lands just outside the 22, meaning Italy can't call the mark and then they can't kick directly into touch. Italy are already somewhat disorganised after 2 kicks in a row, so when Violi kicks back, Italy's chase is not great. The tackle is made, but the line is not set, nor when the ball comes out. England's attack, on the other hand, absolutely is. Violi is behind to cover for the chip, but spots the overlap. He rushes in to try and cover, except he covers too hard, rushing up, which allows Farrell to just skip past him and through the gap. Ben Youngs is then on hand to run it in, taking the ball over a different white line to normal. This try is 100% a product of England kicking the ball repeatedly. It's not a dull or dire strategy, it's a calculation to try and open up space such as this. Young's second try is just very simple work. Italy's defence in the championship has been very well organised, but they just don't adapt well to a mistake or a slip-up. So, the defence spreads well enough with their props on either side of this ruck as guards, except Ziocchi goes in on the ball when it isn't on. Fischetti calls for him to stop, but it's too late. Sinclair hauls Ziocchi over the ruck, and Fischetti is left one-on-one with Ben Youngs. He takes a second to see if there are any other England players coming, and that's all the invitation Ben Youngs needs to apparently turn back into the player he was in 2009 and shoot right through for a second score on cap number 100 of, assuming Eddie Jones remains in charge, 867. It's a very similar mistake that grants Tom Curry the 4th try. A good shove from the maul, England dart blindside, and after making the tackle, Ferrari begins to jog around back into the main line from the short side, but instead of just defending the wing, Maury, who's a back by the way, commits to the ruck. Curry notices, darts, bam, try, bonus point, championship. And hey, when England do try to play phase possession and passing and phases and possession and all of the stuff Clive Woodward and co will have you say that they should do, look what can happen. An over-eager pass by Sinclair is picked off by Canna, who switches it back to Pelledri, who just screams, "No!" at all oncoming defenders and makes it right to the corner. This picked Italy right up. Their general play has been solid throughout the championship, but they've really struggled at the bit we have to put the ball down over the opposition line, only scoring 6 tries in 5 games, with 2 of them now being interceptions. The denied chance at the end of the half is simply bad luck. It's the bounce of the ball. But there's a core lack of belief in the opportunities a few minutes earlier. Italy manufactured a great position on the English line, but then totally shut the bed. The position comes from a tricksy kick that puts May under pressure, and then Italy just commit to old school niggle and drive, winning penalty, and then being held up over the line. However, the scrum, blowing the whole thing and giving England their own penalty, felt sadly inevitable. Because otherwise, there's a blueprint for how Italy might cause a few upsets over the next few years here. The first 50 on Saturday was a masterclass in committing to shithousery. Italy just annoyed England into mistakes, playing a really infuriating brand to face. But Same as in defence. When given the ball, Italy aren't comfortable when the pieces are ever so slightly out of place. Off the scrum here, they run a free-phase move. First phase, get the ball wide through Matteo Menazzi, then second back into the middle of the park, splitting English defence. However, the Italian attack is not split. They leave 9 players on one side against 5 defenders. And whilst the initial pass by Fagetti isn't ideal, the sheer options allowed Italy to work outside England. But once the ball is being recycled, the jury are going forward, they've no idea what to do. Instead of carrying on some of that momentum, bringing forwards in flat, trying to get carriers involved that fly off playing quite flat to the line, trying to attack an English defence that's going backwards, they stand super deep, giving England's aggressive blitz loads of time to get up in their face and seeing them lose almost all of the ground they made through that ornate free-phase move, which in the end is worth about a few inches. All thanks to one rushed positioning decision. A part of this comes from they're just not used to being in these situations. When you're losing almost every week for club and country, you don't get an awful lot of practice trying to execute opportunities under pressure, and often Italy would just outright miss them. This is in the first 5 minutes and on their own line, but Italy have a huge overlap. They've loads of space, even ignoring the fact Minozzi and Bellini, their 2 quickest players, are right out on the wing outside a shot, way wide of May, the furthest left English defender. There's a frustrating lack of vision and rugby intelligence from a lot of the Italian forwards, but they're just going to need to get better. This Six Nations, they've created plenty of time and chances. They've just taken very, very few of them. Smith has been up front that this tournament is about preparation. Conor O'Shea always said his aim was to play the long game for Italy, to get the structures in place under his tenure that will lead to them being competitive in 10, 15 years' time. Smith has now gone an encouraging step on from there, and so his goal is to build for 3 years' time for Italy to have their best ever World Cup under his stewardship. The Azzurri have dug out a few very interesting options this Six Nations, but only really Pellegrini and Garbisi have made any headlines at all. Tommaso Allen is obviously a genuinely class 10 these days. Matteo Bellini has been very good on the wing. Luca Biaggi has led well at hooker. Carlo Canna has established himself as a very solid 12. Nicola Canone is rough around the edges but looks very much like a test match lock. Italy are building something, and we just need to give them time rather than banging on the same really boring drum about kicking them out. France were introduced to the championship in 1910. They only won 2 games in their first 10 years. Italy won more than that, and France didn't win an outright title until 1959. And yet, if only Anton Dupont could tell the time, they might have won it again this year, 110 years on from their debut. But whilst it might feel a bit like England stole it, it was such a daring and well-plotted heist, it's hard to have any argument that England didn't deserve it. They're a team who could be so far out buried in Paris and secure a losing bonus point, and then be so wound up and worn down in Rome and still manage to pile on enough points to carry them home. And the best bit is, we only need to wait a week to see everyone else get another shot at them. England start against Georgia next Saturday, whilst Italy face Scotland, knowing this is yet another key step in their journey towards winning the 2049 Six Nations. Thank you for watching that. There is one game left to cover in the Six Nations, France against Ireland. That will be coming in the next week, prior to the start of the Autumn Rugby Nations Championship of Cup of Trophy of Nations. That is the proper name of the tournament, which is going to be on Amazon from next weekend, starts on Friday. And I'll be covering that then once that begins. There are videos on every game from the Men's Six Nations plus 2 from the Women's. If you want to have a look elsewhere on the channel, there's loads of stuff. Thank you for watching it. Thank you to everyone that supported the channel on Patreon and kind of kept it going. Apologies I can't cover the Bledisloe Cup. I'd love to, I wish I could, but they're ripping the videos down and putting strikes against the channel, so I can't. Otherwise, I hope you're having a lovely day. I've been doing a podcast on the World Cup, the 2011 World Cup as well. If you want to look at that, I've got stuff on the World Rugby channel. There's loads of things. I hope you enjoy all of them, and I will see you later this week for France against Ireland Day.